Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. The Interlull is over, folks. That's it. Done and dusted. It is an ex-Interlull. It is dead and buried. In fact, that's it for Interlulls until next season, which I know is a bit like saying, see you next year to somebody on December 31st, but it is what it is. It's like a 3-week injury now is like blah, 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 is out for the season. Hopefully we won't have any of those to report on in the next few weeks, but it's all going to start off again. And we do have the weekend off, which is a bit frustrating when you haven't had a game in such a long time. And then you have to go through an entire weekend and you get to play Monday night. I don't like Monday night football at the best of times, but after this long of a break, it seems cruel and unusual punishment to make us wait. But I don't suppose there's really anything we can do other than, wait until Monday. So let's do that, will we? Let's just sit here and wait till Monday. Kind of bored of waiting now. So maybe we'll talk about stuff. Okay, let's talk about stuff. We've got 2 guests on the show today. A little bit later on, we are going to look at Arsenal by the numbers, if you like, with Tim from 7am kickoff. We're going to take a statistical look at what's going on and what our chances of making the top 4 are like based on what we've been doing this season, away from home, at home, defensively, offensively. And Tim has got some very interesting numbers to go through. So that's in a little while. However, we might as well just get straight on with the show, and I'm always delighted to welcome this particular gentleman back to the Arsecast. It's Philippe Auclair. Good evening, Philippe.
Good evening, Andrew.
We have had what appears to be the longest Interlull of all time to contend with because we'd no football the weekend before. We've had no football last weekend. We're going to have no football this weekend because we're playing on Monday night against Newcastle. Thank you very much indeed to Sky.
Stinks.
Boo, I agree. We've got more Monday night football coming up in April as well. I think we play Leicester, maybe Watford on a Monday night too. So this is they're really fiddling with our schedule in this particular month. We were playing pretty well going into this international break.
You can say that, yes.
Do you?
Pretty damn well,
Pretty
actually.
damn well. Do you have a little bit of fear that this might have interrupted our momentum, or is it, considering the fact we've got 8 games in April, a good chance to have recharged our batteries a bit?
I would rather use the second. I don't think it will be so detrimental. I am more worried about the schedule itself, about the games themselves, because I don't feel as confident as quite a few of my friends are that this is actually a good schedule for the rest of the season. I'm a little bit worried of our trips.
It's the away games.
Places. I'm very worried. I'll be absolutely frank. I'm very worried. Not necessarily about the games against Newcastle, which we'll have, as you kindly reminded me on Monday night. For goodness sake, I thought, I got my Arsenal back, but no, it's Monday, it's not Sunday. It's terrible. But I'm not. I'm not too worried about the effect of the international break, especially since if you look of the contenders for the top 4, we're probably one of the clubs. I don't think our players will be particularly exhausted after this. There's been apparently some rest and recuperation in warmer climes. It's more. I don't know if you feel like me, but I'm worried about this away form and the fact that yes, we've had some very decent performances of late, but they've been, with the exception of the Tottenham game, of course, they've been at home.
Yeah,
and I'm seeing a particularly difficult April where we are playing Everton away, Napoli at home, Watford away, and then Napoli at São Paulo, and that is, within within 11 days.
Yeah, we've also got Leicester away and Wolves away to contend with as well. So
yes, but I think that should be the judge of peace, so to speak. This is going to be the tricky period that we're going to have to this 11-day period that we will have to deal with.
Yeah.
And by the way, thank you again, the Premier League, for making sure that we play on the Thursday, against Napoli, but to make sure that we play as late as possible on the Sunday before a European game. This is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you indeed, Premier League people. The crucial period, as you talk about, those 11 days, I mean, I feel like over the course of this season, I've sort of said, this is a decisive moment for Unai Emery.
How many times have you said that?
I think I've said it 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
And each time we've kind of come through that period well. You know, I think most recently of the 2 games against Tottenham and Manchester United, where I feel like if things hadn't gone as well as they had, the mood around the club would be very, very different right now. Not simply because it's difficult to see how we would finish in the top 4, but because the improvements that we wanted to see from this team just weren't there, particularly in those big games. And I do have a little bit more confidence in the team's ability to cope with this run of games than I did, let's say, 5 weeks ago, before the Tottenham game. Before, I think the Tottenham game was encouraging, even if the result and the circumstances of the result were disappointing. I feel like they can take some encouragement and they can take some heart from that. And what I also think was encouraging to me, anyway, was the fact that Unai Emery has brought back Mesut Ozil, brought back Aaron Ramsey, fitted them into his team, and rotated quite heavily in some of those games. You know, because there were some Europa League games in there as well where we played Rennes, and one of the games against Rennes didn't go very well. But that was the 10-men game where he got everything wrong. Every decision he made that night was wrong. But ultimately, it didn't come back to haunt us in the second leg. But he successfully rotated his team, and they haven't looked as disjointed as you might expect when he's made 5 or 6 changes.
No, they haven't. I don't know if you would agree with me that one of the key performers during that period has been Laurent Koscielny.
I just wrote down Laurent Koscielny's name here as we started talking, because I want to ask you about him and what you make of the comeback that he's had. Are you surprised? Are you impressed?
More than surprised.
Staggered? What word would you use?
Flabbergasted. Not flabbergasted, but it's far more than surprise. I don't think there are many examples of a player recovering at that age from as serious an injury as it was, which honestly for many players would be a career-ending injury, and being able to play at this kind of level. And also, I mean, because one of the problems when you come back from an injury like this is that it's not so much the physical problem. You can imagine that the Achilles has healed and so forth, that he's had all the medical care. It's how then you approach the games mentally and how much of yourself you put into it. And in fact, we've got the Laurent Koscielny, which reminds me of the Laurent Koscielny of his best seasons, which is saying something in terms of the impact, in terms of how he goes into challenges, in terms of his speed over the first few meters. And I thought, this is the kind of fear that you had, that the dynamism which characterizes his game. He's very much somebody who acts when he sees danger. He acts. He's not somebody who waits and will have the last second tackle. No, he loves intercepting the ball. He loves going forward to battle for the ball, and he's doing that with as much energy as he was doing before his injury.
Yeah, it is amazing.
That is astonishing, and in a team that doesn't have many natural leaders, shall we say, he is emerging as one of them at the end of the season, exactly at the moment when it matters, and which is absolutely crucial. And I'm very surprised, but I also know that I chatted with him quickly when he came back. First of all, that there is a sense that he's been given what he has to enjoy what has been given. That is a bit of a miracle. He is fully aware of that. And there was so much hunger, and I think that he realized how much he was missing playing football. And what you're seeing at the moment is a player who suddenly, I'm being given another chance, and I'm going to make the absolute most of it. And it's, it translates into suddenly, why is it that Bernd Leno is suddenly looking like a very good keeper? Well, maybe it has to do with the fact that he's got a bloody good central defender in front of him.
Well, you look at some of the interventions that Koscielny has made, and the way that he is defending now, at what age is he? He's 33, I think, isn't he? And just to sort of reference your point about coming back, I know he's a couple of years older, but Jonathan Walters, the Republic of Ireland forward, has retired recently because of Achilles problems and an inability to get over, properly get over an Achilles tendon rupture. And Koscielny is back, I think, defending like a 25-year-old, a 26-year-old, the way he is throwing himself at the ball, the way he's making blocks, the way perhaps his experience is allowing him to read the game, to get in those kind of positions. I think it sets an example to all the other players around him. And maybe, I think Leno deserves credit on his own merits for making saves. And some of the saves that he's made in recent weeks have been absolutely fantastic. But I think you can look perhaps to the left of Laurent Koscielny and see a defender who has also improved, and that's Kolasinac, in that we all can see what he brings to this team in the offensive third. He's a brilliant crosser of the ball. He loves to get forward, but defending hasn't always been his strongest suit. And I think in him, perhaps it's the example of Koscielny rubbing off on him, we're seeing him sort of play a bit like Koscielny in terms of what he's putting on the line to make the challenges and the tackles and the blocks that you need to make.
Yes. Did he always have this? Probably. I must say, I was always a little bit. Remember when Kolasinac actually came to the club from Schalke, and at the beginning, and we were all wondering, what on earth is this? This is fantastic. and then he had his ups and downs, but he is, yes, emerging as not just a crowd favorite, but somebody who is finding as well the physical resources at the right time of the season. He's not the only one. There are quite a few players like this actually at the moment. The way Maitland-Niles has also, imposed himself.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the more I'm talking to you, the more the apprehension I was feeling looking at the schedule is dissipating like a morning mist as the sun goes up in the sky, and this is wonderful. Carry on, please. And I'm thinking in terms, as long as, of course, all the injury fears are misplaced, I hope, because there are some doubts about some players. It's a bit too early to say now, because we're waiting for Emery, of course, to give us the latest news in his presser about what's going to happen against Newcastle. But there were doubts about a few players. Aaron Ramsey, for example, was he could be back. There also, Kolasinac himself and Socrates, if I'm not mistaken, there were little doubts. Socrates didn't play against Liechtenstein. Kolasinac didn't play against Armenia, which is great.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
It is.
But does that mean that they will not be quite at the top of their game, or that it was simply a case of the Interlull being taken as the Interlull? I don't know. We'll know on Monday night, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, we might know a bit before that. But I think you're right. There are players who, for various reasons, have not been in the team. Kolasinac missed a good chunk with injury. Koscielny, he missed a good chunk with injury, only came back in November, December. So, the fatigue issue that might be plaguing players at this time of the season. Ramsey, I know he's got his thigh injury, and maybe that's a consequence of playing a lot in the couple of weeks before he went away on international duty. But Mesut Ozil, another guy who hasn't been playing as much as you would expect him to play. So
you could add Nacho Monreal to that.
Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah, so maybe these legs will be useful, and certainly he is going to have to rotate. It is sort of noticeable, or it was noticeable in the weeks before this break, that Emery was erring on the side of experience a bit when picking his team. Even if we were all surprised at the fact that he picked Lacazette, Aubameyang, Ramsey and Ozil against Manchester United, there's a logic to it in that, they're our most experienced players, probably our best players coming into the business end of the season. He may have to go with the youth a little bit. I know Torreira is suspended domestically until the Watford game, but if we do have some problems with Ramsey and Xhaka, for example, there'd be a big onus on Matteo Guendouzi to come back into the team. He didn't have a particularly good night away at Rennes. I'm not sure if it's a case that he was perhaps believing the hype a little. He wasn't the same player.
Or a case as well coming from Lorient, perhaps, the Lorient-Rennes, there's a local rivalry that perhaps he was a little bit too hyped up for that game. It might be that his head, but, he's still a very young player. It might be he was not in the best mental conditions for a game of that kind.
Perhaps.
That's possible.
It is. I know. I just wanted to ask you about what's the perception of what he's done this season, given in France, given that he came from Lorient, from Ligue 2, and has made a really significant move to Arsenal and probably played more than he or anyone else expected.
What is this thing, by the way, about the players we pick from Ligue 2? Or who have just who have played in Ligue 2 and made themselves a name in Ligue 2? Yeah, no, Koscielny is another one.
Giroud?
Absolutely.
Was another one?
Giroud was another one, even though, he succeeded with Montpellier before coming to Arsenal. But he still was very much somebody who had he was a fresher from Ligue 2, as it were, So obviously we're doing some things right. No, I think many people are seduced almost by what they've seen from Matteo Guendouzi. He's been very highly thought of, even when he was at Lorient. It was not as if he was a complete unknown, not at all. People knew about him. But they are they're very surprised, to say the least, by, first of all, how much he's played. Nobody was expecting him to have that much playing time at Arsenal in his first season. Nobody. He's still quite far, I think, from claiming a place in Didier Deschamps' team. I don't think you would expect him to challenge for N'Golo Kante's or Blaise Matuidi's place in the starting 11 of France. No, but people have been very positively surprised about him and are saying very good things indeed about his progression. And people were expecting him to do something of his career, but he's in advance, basically.
Okay.
Yes, he's only 20 years old. It's quite ridiculous. So he's one of the people that the French have been looking at. On one hand, to say, look at Arsenal, they have to play a guy who comes from Ligue 2, on one hand, because they haven't got the means to compete with the others with the bigger names. And on the other, saying, oh, hold on a minute, they're not doing too badly, are they? And they're not doing too badly with somebody like Matteo Guendouzi. What's going on? So people might have start thinking in France as well about Unai Emery as well, who left with this image, certainly with the PSG supporters, of being a kind of loser. You wouldn't believe the things that you hear about Unai Emery in France. You wouldn't believe them, honestly. It's unforgivable almost.
We did speak to the author of his book,
Romain Molina.
Yes, exactly. And he was on and saying that because Emery was maybe a little bit distant with sections of the press, they didn't really take to him particularly well.
Correct. I mean, I can't say that communication is his forte. I wouldn't say that.
No, that's a fair point.
But in any case, thank you very much. You've rekindled my belief, because, when you look at it, even if the schedule is a very tough one, and obviously, I mean, one of the big things, how we're going to manage the Europa League and the league at the same time, when now we're no longer in a situation where we think we've really got to go full tilt for the Europa League because it's our only chance to finish in the top four. This is no longer the case. We're now on the heels of Tottenham. We don't know how they will have gone through their own interlull. Their results as a club have been very poor of late. And then suddenly we're in a situation we're really on their heels. And we have a good chance actually to go above them, given their schedule and our schedule. I'm just wondering how we're going to be able to manage on both fronts with a squad that is not the deepest, shall we say, of the top six.
No, I mean, there are going to be...
That is a concern.
Yeah.
But again, as you said, we've seen Emery make some interesting choices. We've seen him rotating. We've seen him also being very adaptable, tactically speaking. changing his formation, playing with 4 attacking players, playing with two strikers up front, a single one, playing with a 3, playing with a 4, being able to shuffle the cards, and the players, more interestingly, responding to it very well indeed, which shows, I mean, that's one of the areas where I think the club has progressed the team has progressed an awful lot within in a single season, is how the players have become far more flexible tactically than they were under Wenger.
Yeah. I think that's true. And just before, I mean, I share some concerns there, particularly defensively. We talk about Koscielny. There's no way he can play 8 games in the month of April. No. So we're going to have to rotate a little bit in that regard and mix things up at the back. And of course, the thing is, he's so important because he is basically our best defender. It'll be very interesting to see where Emery prioritizes the use of Laurent Koscielny, because that might tell us where his priority lies in terms of what he feels is the best path for the Champions League. Just before I let you go, one final question about a player who maybe doesn't get quite the limelight that his strike partner does. His strike partner is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, but Alex Lacazette this season feels to me like a player who's really grown and settled at Arsenal. He looks like he feels happy. He looks like he has taken responsibility in terms of the way that he plays the game. I know he had that sending off, and that was a bit silly and what have you. But, you know, anyone can have a moment or two of silliness. You know, if you repeat those mistakes, then that's a different thing. And that was very much a once-off for him. But he's another guy, if you want to talk about somebody who leads by example, the work rate, the willingness to do a job for the team, whether it's up front or getting back and you know, being the first line of defence, if you will. I think he's had a really excellent season, Lacazette. I know strikers are often judged solely by the amount of goals that they score, but I think his contribution this season goes beyond that.
It does. I mean, his goal-scoring record is still pretty damn good. I mean, it's 14 goals in 38 games. And more importantly, if you look at the amount of playing time he's had, rather than to think of the games that perhaps he might have been a sub, as he was, for example, at the beginning of the campaign in the Europa League, as he was as well in some games in the Premier League before becoming now a regular starter. I mean, actually starting almost every single game. Actually, in fact, he started every single game in the Premier League for quite a while, for several months now, since the game against Liverpool, in fact, in December. So that tells you something about it. And he was, his attitude is remarkable. And I must say that in a way, there also he surprised me, because I was not expecting this necessarily from him, having, you know, followed him when he was at Lyon, where, you know, you knew his qualities. I mean, one of his main qualities, even though he's not the quickest, movement is one of his great qualities. And the thing is that he needs people who are on the same wavelength, who are quick in their brain, to see his movement and are able to give him the ball in the situations where he can create danger in the box. And this was not always the case, by the way, with Arsenal. And I'm wondering if also it's a question, people talk about how a player adapts to a league and so forth. There is also the question how teammates adapt to a new player and realize that he's a different kind of striker. That is a kind of striker which he will do those short runs and so forth, and then is also a wonderful first line of defense. At the moment, I would say, if you were to choose between Lacazette and Aubameyang as a single striker in a game, who would you go for?
It would depend on the opposition, I have to say.
It would depend on the opposition, precisely. And even to ask to respond like that shows how far we've gone from the moment when, remember, Aubameyang was signed from Borussia Dortmund, and everybody thought this is the end of Lacazette as an Arsenal striker. So we've moved a long way, and the reason we've moved a long way since then is because of Lacazette's the quality of his performances, and indeed the fact that he's completely taken upon him this idea of battling for the club and for the team in areas of the pitch where normally people might not necessarily do so, and he's doing it with a selflessness which is quite remarkable because it's costing him. This kind of selflessness costs strikers, because when you repeat sprints like this just to intercept a ball, just to harry a defender, this is energy that you're not going to have in the last 20 minutes of the game, when suddenly you might have a pass to goal which is opening to you, and you might pay the price for the energy that you've spent on other things, on the selfless things you've done before. It takes, I think, a special kind of player to do that. Not all players do it. Not all strikers do that. And he's doing it now, game in, game out. And I personally, at the moment, think I would personally put Lacazette ahead of Aubameyang in most cases, in most configurations, except perhaps when we know we're going to be pinned back and we're going to have to launch the ball long and to rely on somebody who is incredibly pacey. Otherwise, I would say Lacazette perhaps offers more guarantees at the moment. Seems in any case to finish his season in a very good state of mind. Again, why he's been ignored by Didier Deschamps is another question, which is interesting. I know we've got plenty of strikers, but
sure. Well, look, it's to our benefit, that
exactly. So there you go.
Yeah, he is, and I think the relationship and the friendship with Aubameyang is clearly a factor in here as well. But I have a feeling he is. You're right. The selflessness does cost him goals, because quite often he's using the ball in positions from which he can't score, or he's looking to feed somebody else or to feed Aubameyang. So I think he deserves huge credit, and I have a feeling he's going to score a couple of very important goals between now and the end of the season. He's got an eye for a big game and a big goal, so we'll keep fingers crossed there. Philippe, I'm glad to make you feel a little bit better about what's coming in April.
Very kind of you.
Yeah, no, it's
much appreciated.
No problem. Hopefully, you're not going to come after me with a big stick at the end of April for getting your hopes up. But maybe we'll talk then, and we can see how it goes. Thanks, Philippe.
Thank you.
You can follow Philippe on Twitter at Philippe Auclair, And if you want to hear a bit more of him and you're not an Arseblog member on Patreon, sign up, because episode 2 of a series of podcasts we call The Players is going to be available very soon for Patreon members. It's about Robert Pires. Myself and Philippe chatting about Robert Pires for a good hour, enjoying the happy memories and all the great things that Robert Pires did for Arsenal. We look back at his entire career, from start to finish and beyond. And it's a great conversation. The first episode of that series was Dennis Bergkamp, by the way. So Robert Pires is going to be number 2. It will be published over the weekend on our Patreon site. So if you want to join up, you can by going to patreon.com/Arseblog. Patreon.com/Arseblog. It costs $5 a month, and you get instant access to all the podcasts and all the articles we have there, and you become part of a great community, and you help support everything else that we do here on Arseblog. So to get all of that and all the stuff that's going to come in the future, $5 a month, patreon.com/Arseblog. Right, Arsenal have got 8 Premier League games left this season. Top 4 in Champions League football is in our hands, but 5 of those 8 games are away from home. What does that tell us about our potential chances of making the top 4? Well, who better to ask than Tim from 7am Kickoff. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Now, because I've asked you, of course, because we know that statistics tell you everything about football, and you can make absolute ironclad predictions about what's going to happen based on numbers alone. I think it's fair that we just make that point before we get into this. But looking at the fixtures that we've got left, and the fact that we are away from home more than we're at home, what are your thoughts based on what you've seen from Arsenal so far this season, and what do the numbers tell us about what these games might bring?
One of the things that I like to do is take a look at the teams that we've already played and compare them to the teams that we played last season, so that we're getting a really closer like-for-like comparison, or at least it seems like that in my mind. There are a few little things that we have to move around. Like, for example, Wolves were not in the league last season, so we compared them. I compared them to West Brom. Maybe that's not fair, but the other 2 teams were Swansea and Cardiff and Stoke. So anyway, I compared those teams. Stoke is closer to Cardiff because of the way they play, and maybe Fulham might be closer to Swansea because of the way they play. Wolves and West Brom, maybe not such a great comparison, but what else am I supposed to do?
Yeah. You don't have any option.
Right, exactly. So we take a look at those and compare those 2 teams, and take a look at compare those 2 seasons, and take a look at how we performed against those teams last season and how we're performing against those teams this season. And, of course, as you already know, we have 19 points this season. And last season we had 16 points
away from
in away
home.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're 3 better.
Okay. That's a good start in terms of improvement. What's sort of the underlying metric to this improvement? I mean, it's not a massive improvement, but it is still an improvement.
Yeah. The first thing is that we're converting shots better this season over last season. So last season we converted at about 7%. So of all of our shots, if we took 100 shots, we would get 7 goals. And this season we're converting 16%.
And what's the average?
About 10.
Right. Okay.
So there's a bit of a twofold thing there. One is that we took a lot more shots last season than we did this season. So of course our conversion rate's going to be lower, and we're taking fewer shots this season. And so if we're converting, it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing. If you score, you don't need to keep taking a lot more shots. So because we weren't scoring very well last season, we were taking a lot more shots. And now because we are scoring more, earlier in the games and better, we are taking fewer shots. So our conversion rate goes up because of that. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah, you're not chasing goals, throughout the games when you're away, and that was certainly a big problem last season when we were finding it very difficult to score. I mean, in terms of creating chances, what's the comparison between this season and last season? Are the chances we're creating better, based on what we've seen? Yep,
exactly. And so because we were chasing games a lot, we were taking a lot of what I would call, pot shots from outside the box. So we took 117 shots from outside the box in away games. Again, we're just talking about away games, and only scored 1 goal last season. So that was just an indicator. And that also, of course, shows why we were only scoring 7% of our overall shots. And this season, conversely, and we talked about this earlier in the year about how it looked like Emery was letting his players shoot from outside, whereas Wenger kind of had a little bit of maybe a prohibition against that.
Yeah.
Even though they took the shots anyway, but this season, because of a little bit more, I don't know whether it's encouragement or not, but we are scoring more goals from outside the 18-yard box, and they have 6 goals from outside the 18-yard box in away games this season.
Wow.
Yeah. So our finishing rate from outside the box is 11%. So even if everything else is, and that's really high,
yeah.
Even if everything else is relatively the same number of shots inside the box, same number of shots in big chances and all these other things, which they are, the fact that we've scored these goals from outside the 18-yard box have actually significantly improved our form, our finishing, and our points on the table. So you can think about the matches that we played last year where we lost and this year where we actually won, and we won because of those goals outside the 18-yard box.
Right. So there has been definitely an improvement from an attacking point of view in terms of the number of chances, the quality of the chances, our conversion rate. And people, have talked throughout this season about, how eventually you revert to the mean when it comes to outperforming your XG. And that was certainly the case, in particular with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who we're going to talk about in a couple of moments' time. But, there's 2 parts, obviously, well, more than 2 parts, but another significant factor in this is what we're doing defensively on the road. So what's going on there compared to what happened last year?
Well, first of all, we've only lost 5 times, so that's a huge deal. That and last year we had 9 losses in away games. But the problem from my perspective, if I were looking at this from outside and not as an Arsenal supporter, I would get a little bit antsy that we allow so many shots. Just generally, there's lots of different ways to control teams and lots of different ways to stop teams from taking shots, and we're not seeming to be able to do that. One of them is, of course, possession, and our possession, in away games is not nearly as good as it could be. So we actually tend to sit back a little bit and allow teams to come onto us once we take the lead, rather than sort of controlling the game from midfield and from a possession standpoint. So we're allowing a lot of shots, and that makes a stats guy like me very nervous, or even worried.
Yeah.
But the key thing is that we are not allowing more big chances. So the big chances are those shots where the players are one-on-one with the goalkeeper, or even wide open goal, or one-on-one with a defender, or in a really great position where you think he's going to score.
Yeah.
We are not allowing more of those chances this year than last year. So even if we're allowing more shots, the big chances stay the same. And the reason why those are so important is because they're almost like a 50-50 chance. If you think about every time you've seen a player go one-on-one with a goalkeeper, I bet you if you play it back in your mind, you'll remember that they're probably about 50-50 chance. They're a little bit less than that, actually. But I like to think of it that like a coin flip. And so if we're allowing the same number of those, and we're allowing the opposition to have a few more shots from outside the box, like I've already said, those have converted at like a really low rate, 2%, 3%, then that's fine. And that's what's happening. So basically the opposition are converting it at the exact same rate. And so in terms of expected goals, which is just a metric of how we measure shot quality, they may be taking more shots, but the expected goals are exactly the same, of about 1.5 per game per season against. So in other words, That's really bad though. You don't want to be conceding 1.5. You know what I mean? Expected goals per game.
I mean, look, I think we have been this season somewhat fortunate that some of the finishing from the opposition has not been as good as you would expect at Premier League level. You know, there have been big chances, even during our unbeaten run. I remember talking about how if, you know, at a particular moment in a game, an opposition player had been more calm or had produced the finish that you would expect him to produce, those games might have taken a different trajectory. And people can put it down to the quality of the players or what have you. But I think at this level, you know, when you present some of the chances we've given the opposition during the season, I'm a bit surprised we haven't conceded more goals away from home. I'm interested as well to know if what our goalkeeper is doing is making a difference, because Bernd Leno has come in, he's taken over from Petr Cech, and generally I think people have been increasingly impressed by the way that he's playing. So is he contributing to the fact that our away record is better in terms of saves he's made?
No.
Right. Okay. Explain that to me then.
Well, yeah. So Bernd Leno actually, overall, if you look at his whole record this season, is significantly better than Petr Cech was last season. And I don't think anybody would question that. He's saved 54% of the big chances that he's faced, whereas Cech saved 34% last season. And he's over 50% in these really danger area shots that he's faced. So he is significantly better than Petr Cech. And as I went back through Cech's entire career, you can see this sort of slow decline, and from 2015, 2016, where he was really at his prime, and it's unfortunate we didn't win the league that year. Then the next year it declined slightly, and then 2017, 2018 was his lowest ever in terms of his goalkeeping stats. And he was only saving 34% of the big chances he was facing. So that seems really bad, but it's actually kind of makes him an average goalkeeper.
Okay.
So he went from really great to just average. So it was important to bring in a new goalkeeper, and Bernd Leno overall for the whole season has been fantastic. I mean, his overall numbers are great, but what's really odd is that that's completely being uplifted by his home numbers. So at home, and I'm just going to pull up the raw numbers here. Let's just talk about big chances. At home, this season, Bernd Leno has saved 19 big chances and only allowed 4 to be scored. So he's 19 out of 25 saves, 83%.
Right.
He saved 83% of the big chances he's faced. That's astronomical. That's unbelievably high.
Right. That's at home.
That's at home. And then in away games, it's the exact opposite. He saved 3 of 18. So he's only saved 17% of those big chances that he's faced in away games. And what I think this indicates, along with all of the other things that we see with the team and the way that we play in away games, where we're allowing so many chances, where we're allowing teams to have all of these shots against us, is that I believe that this is actually indicates a mental thing, because clearly physically, he has the capability to be an outstanding goalkeeper.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I wouldn't have like looked at him away from home and thought there'd be that much of a disparity between the saves at home and the saves away from home. I can remember one or two where I thought, oh, maybe he should have done a little bit better with that, but not to that extent.
And fair enough. There are criticisms of the big chance metric, whether or not, some people disagree with what is a big chance. And of course that is going to be the debate over this. But in general, all of his saves in away games are way lower. So again, if I take a look at just shots in a specific area, in that danger area, he's only saving 34% of those in away games. And in home games, he is saving 82%.
Wow.
So they mimic each other, and that's taking out this whole idea of that's just shots in an area. That's taking out the idea of whether they are a quote unquote big chance or not. And that's why I like that metric, even though it's kind of looked at a little bit less, whatever, as big chances. Big chances tend to be one of the bigger metrics. And so my idea of just looking at shots in that area around the 18-yard box, not around the 18-yard box, but around the penalty spot and in, so up to the 6-yard box, up to the goal, he's saving 82% of those at home and just 35% away. So again, it feels to me like we're not allowing better or worse, however you want to look at it, chances. But for whatever reason, there's a sort of it feels like there's some kind of mental block there.
Yeah.
Like physically he's able to do it, but who knows what's going on.
But I mean, I suppose when you do have what you might consider a big chance, or when a player is one-on-one with the goalkeeper, maybe the perception of it when a goal goes in, you don't naturally tend to think that the goalkeeper is at fault. If he's left one-on-one, or if he's left, trying to deal with a striker at the back post who's free and can, it's not really an indication of the quality of the goalkeeper in a way, even though you can point to the difference in the stats at home to say, okay, at home he can make those saves. I do wonder if there's something else we can figure out as to what the problem might be there, whether it's defensively or whether, I don't know. It's a weird one.
Typically what I look at for defensively is, how many big chances are we conceding?
Yeah.
And that to me, so the gold standard for me was the 2015-2016 season when Arsene Wenger played with Coquelin and Cazorla in midfield. And the total season, we only conceded 25 big chances. So the opposition only had 25 of those one-on-ones. That's how you lock down the defense. Like from midfield, you just lock down the defense. At home this season, we've already conceded 33 big chances to the opposition. In away, we've conceded 23 big chances. And now those are, so 1.6 per game is what we're conceding, 1.64 per game. And actually, we concede more at home, 2 per game, 2 big chances per game at home.
I wonder if that's because we're a team that likes to play on the... at home, you're going to push forward a bit more, and we're not great at defending the counter attacks. It's certainly been an area of vulnerability. And I do think defensively, it's one of those things that... it is something for Unai Emery to sort out. But just very, very quickly before we move on to Aubameyang, when we look at those underlying statistics going into these final 8 games of the season, and we've got to play Everton, which is going to be a tough game. Watford, we lost there last season. Wolves, of course, we didn't play. Leicester, we lost there last season. In some mitigation, we were down to 10 men very early on. If I remember, it was Mavropanos who got sent off. And Burnley away, I can't remember what we did in that particular game, but it was probably something which really annoyed Burnley. We won, but wasn't it maybe a really late penalty? Or the Koscielny handball goal was a season before that, but I have in my mind that was one of those games like in injury time where they went mental. which I'd be quite happy to see again. But it just shows you that it's a tough fixture to play when you go to Burnley. I know they're not doing as well this season, but it is going to be a tough one, and those games are really going to test us from a defensive point of view.
Absolutely. So last season, as you pointed out, we took 7 points from those 5 games, so from Everton, Watford, Wolves, Leicester, and Burnley. And I'm saying West Brom is Wolves. Okay. Yeah. But actually, if we do that exact same thing again, the same 7 points, however we want to slice it up, 1 win and 4 draws, whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as we get those same 7 points, I think we can actually still finish top 4, because I know, right? It's going to be close no matter what. Unless we really start turning on the jets and blowing people away in away games, I don't see us. I see this is going to be a very close race. But 76 points or 75 points. So if I'm looking at some of the other websites that predict these sort of things, 538 is a website that does these kinds of predictions, and they're thinking around 75 points should take third to fourth place. So if we get 7 points there and we win our final 2 home games, which is what our form would indicate that we would do, I think we can finish in the top 4. And it would be wonderful to beat Burnley on the last day of the season, and hopefully with some dodgy handball penalty.
Yeah.
So that Sean Dyche can this little temper tantrum.
Yeah. I have a feeling, I know you're looking at this from a statistical point of view, and of course, the best statistics come from our guts. And my guts are telling me we might need a bit more than 7 points from the 5 away games to do that. But one man who might well be key to how we perform in these games is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, our leading scorer. I think he scored 22 goals this season. He's a really good goal scorer, but he's also a really good goal chance misser. I don't know if we have any statistics for that, but as much as the goals stick out in your mind, some of the chances he's missed this season really stick in your mind. And you go back to our last game against Rennes, which of course feels like it happened months ago at this point, and he'd scored twice and had 2 incredible chances to get a hat-trick and to absolutely seal the game and miss them. And I've heard people talk about this before, that, it's not necessarily that he's a world-class, brilliant finisher, but what he is brilliant at is getting into a position where he has chances to score goals. His profligacy has been something that's been with him throughout his career. Where is what's happening to him this season? What's happening to him? 22-goal leading scorer. He's on track to score maybe 30 goals this season. So, it's a confusing thing to talk about. But in terms of how that has been with him throughout his career, what's this season looking like?
So that's a great question. So the funny thing is I've been following him for years, and I don't know why I just decided to start following him, but it might have been because I was watching a Bundesliga game and I saw him make several of those kinds of misses. I've seen him do that exact thing you're talking about against Rennes, where he will get himself into this astonishingly good position and then hit the post. And he already has 2 big chances this season in the Premier League where he's hit the post, which is more than I think it's more than almost any other striker. So yes, first off, he gets himself into those positions, and that is absolutely crucial to being a top striker. Comparing him to other strikers in the league like Mane, Aguero, Kane, Salah, Sterling, all these other folks who have around the same the same number of goals total. The thing is that he has missed more big chances than any of them. And his finishing is at the lowest of his career so far in terms of big chance conversion. So just in terms of those big moments where he's scoring, where you expect him to score that goal, he's only finishing 28%. So he's 7 out of 25. And that's well below average. Average is 44% or 45%. Let's just say 45%. So he's at 28%. Now, and to compare, to give you an example, Aguero this season's been playing very well, and he's scored 52%. Mane is actually the highest right now. He scored 63% of those. But what's weird. And if you go back over Aubameyang's career, it's kind of almost been a steady decline. So where he was really fantastic at finishing these chances before, 48% in 2014-15, 52% in 2015-16, 48% in 2016-17, 38% last season, 28% this season. So it could be indicative of, I mean, he is getting older. It could be indicative of him starting to fade a little bit. But what's fantastic is that he is leading all of those strikers I spoke about before in quote unquote small chances scored. So that was my dog, by the way.
That's okay. We love dogs on this. We love dogs on this podcast. Once they're not too close to the microphone, they scare the shit out of me. That's okay.
In terms of small chances scored, all of those other strikers I listed, Mane, Aguero, Kane, Salah, and Sterling, all have either 4 or 5 small chances scored. So that's a funny way of putting non-penalties. Okay, so let's take the penalties out, and then let's just look at those chances that are like right up against the goal mouth. All right, so they're all scoring at a regular rate. Aubameyang has 7 of those, so he scored 7 out of 39 7 out of 46 shots, and so his small chance conversion is 15%. So when we say, and that's unusual for him. Normally in these other seasons I talked about, for example, in the 2016-2017 season, he scored 48% of his big chances, 23 out of 48. And he didn't score hardly any little chances, like 1 or 2 in the whole season. And as you know, we've talked about this before, he doesn't score goals from outside the box normally.
But he has scored a few this season, hasn't he?
He has, exactly. And that's kind of what's going on here with him, is he is scoring from different positions, and he is way better at scoring those smaller chances than he is at scoring the big chances this season, which, if you want to be sanguine about it, I don't really care how he gets 30 goals. I don't care if he elbows them in.
Yeah.
If they count as goals, then that's fine by me. But it does, what I'm trying to say here is that it does sort of give some evidence to the people's feelings, like, well, why is he missing these big chances? And yet, why has he still got 17 goals? You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, so
that is certainly a consideration. And maybe, we're talking about a potential decline when you hammer out the percentage of big chances, finish there at 48%, 38%, now at 28%. That's a 10% each year. Well, 10% off the 100% rather than the actual decline being 10% itself. I can't work those maths out. But, there is still 8 games left in the Premier League this season for him to come back somewhere closer to the mean, if you like. So if he does start converting those big chances, then there is a greater chance of Arsenal finishing in the top 4.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we need. We need him to finish those chances. He obviously is fantastic at getting himself into those positions. And, and again, as we've said all along, these things can even out pretty quickly, because we are talking about small numbers. 7 out of 25, you're going to get comments. Well, that's a small sample size. And that's fair enough. Yeah, that is a small sample size.
It is, but
you can get all kinds of statistical variation there.
Exactly, but 12 or 13 out of 35, it starts looking a little bit better, doesn't it? So
absolutely.
Okay, well,
so let's hope he gets some.
Yeah, exactly. Let's keep fingers crossed for that, because I do think we're going to need to be pretty clinical, particularly in those away games. Tim, as ever, thanks a million. If you don't read Tim's blog, it's at 7amkickoff.com. Great stuff, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed to Tim. He's on Twitter at 7amkickoff, at 7amkickoff. And as I said, the blog itself is 7amkickoff.com. Really interesting numbers about Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang there. I have a feeling, I know I said this to Philippe as well about Lacazette and him scoring some goals, but I've got a feeling about our 2 strikers in this run-in. I think it's a good feeling. I don't want to say too much, but I feel like a lot of our hopes in achieving what we want to achieve rest on them. We focus a lot on our defense, and that's understandable. The amount of chances we concede, the amount of goals we've conceded this season has not really been good enough, and that's certainly an area for improvement. But I absolutely feel that if we are going to get over the line into fourth place or third place or into the Champions League, even via the Europa League, these two guys are basically what it hinges on, because I don't necessarily see a massive improvement in our defence between now and the end of the season. I think there's a lot of work to do in the summer and next season to make us defensively better. But if we can score the goals, then we can really cause all the opposition we're going to face between now and the end of the season some real trouble. So let's keep fingers crossed. If you want another podcast to listen to, there is a podcast. Myself and Tim Stillman did it about the Arsenal women. Tim talks to the Guardian's football correspondent Susie Rack. A lot of really interesting stuff about the Arsenal women, and they are, well, not on the verge of winning the title, but it's in their own hands. If they can get the right results, they're going to be champions, and that's something that we should be proud of, because Arsenal as a football club goes beyond the first team. It goes beyond the men. You know, I wrote about this a little bit in the week on the blog after the great piece that Amy wrote in The Guardian about how they're integrating the training for some of the young girls who are part of the club. They're training with the boys to make their development better. And Per Mertesacker spoke very well, I think. He said, you know, it started off by thinking of our club and what we stand for. How can we integrate everyone a bit better? And I love the way that Per Mertesacker thinks, and I love the way that he talks, and the way that he perceives Arsenal as a club and what it should be and what it should stand for. And I've kind of lost my train of thought here, so I think I might just leave it there. Oh yeah, listen to the Arsenal Women's Podcast. It's on the Arscast feed. Download, listen. If you don't like it, you don't have to listen to another one, but give it a try. You never know. And let's be proud of the fact that our women's team are so good and so successful, and fingers crossed they can go all the way to the title this season. James and I will be here on Tuesday. There's no point doing an Arscast Extra on Monday, seeing as we're playing on Monday night. Fingers crossed for the game. Hopefully we're talking about a good win, a good return to action, batteries recharged, Arsenal doing the business and keeping up that fight for the top four. So join us on Tuesday. In the meantime, have yourselves a great weekend. Until then, cheers, bye-bye.
Following the incredible success of the Henrik Mkhitaryan doll, Crapola Toys is delighted to announce the launch of the new Andrei Arshavin doll. He's a miniature version of your favorite pint-sized Russian forward. He walks, he talks, he sings with all your favorite Arshavin sayings.
Hello, I am Arshavin.
Shut up, boy.
I'm hungry. Please can I have a biscuit? I'm still hungry. Need more biscuit. My hunger is not yet satisfied. I'm going to eat all the biscuits. Joey, have you ever been in a Turkish prison? When the apocalypse comes, I will have no compunction in devouring your body should I need the sustenance.
And just like Mkhitaryan, he can sing like creepy death children.
La la la, la la, Arshavin, la la la, la la, Arshavin. Para Arshavin, he's Russian beauty queen. Eat all the biscuits and then he go.
Order yours today for just $19.99 plus $279.99 shipping. But be quick, stocks are limited and demand is high. Just like the makers of this toy. What the fuck are they thinking? They thinking. They thinking. They thinking. They thinking. They thinking. They